Ms. Kiran Mazumdar joining us on the line. Ma'am, appreciate you taking time out on this Sunday. We've got some important announcements from the 16th meeting of the GST Council, and the Finance Minister just clarified that insulin is going to be taxed at 5% instead of 12% as was proposed earlier. Your thoughts?
Well, I think it's certainly a welcome bit of news, but I personally believe that all these drugs, which are really, life-saving and life-changing drugs for chronic diseases, should actually be exempt of GST. I think both cancer drugs, insulin, and other such, medications for chronic therapies, I think must be exempt of GST is what I would like to have heard.
What was the current taxation on insulin which is being sold in India, ma'am?
Well, it was, as you just mentioned, it was 12, it's around the 12% mark, but reducing it to 5% is certainly welcome news for patients using insulin. But as you know, insulin is a lifelong therapy, and it's a chronic therapy, and I think I would have really appreciated it if the government had actually exempted GST from insulin. In fact, insulin has just been put on the essential medicine list of WHO, as have cancer drugs.
Sure. Ma'am, I request you to just stay on with us. We also have more reactions coming in from the retail side. We have Mr. Rakesh Biyani joining in. We're still in conversation with Ms. Shaw to try and understand how the GST impact on certain life-saving drugs is going to play out. Mr. Biyani, just your thoughts. And sir, I'll just fill you in. I mean, there have been further tweakings and some changes in food items, particularly pickles, ketchup, toppings, sauces, instant food mixes, agarbatti, kajal. A couple of these items of daily consumption, GST rates have been brought down. Most of them are getting taxed now at 12% instead of 18%, which is where most of these items were earlier. Your thoughts, and whether you think that, all of this is going to be passed on to the consumer, or will there be any cushion whatsoever with either the manufacturers or the retailers?
No, I think quite clearly, the government has looked at the representations which have been made, and also, as the finance minister rightly pointed out, in some cases they've even gone against the brief of maintaining rate equivalence, which is actually very welcome, looking into the fact that the consumer basket has changed and consumers are definitely consuming all kinds of new types of products which have become daily routine. So we seem to be making a very quick and fast progress towards a favorable GST structure. Yes, wherever the rate changes are happening and there is a benefit which is going to be there, each one of them is going to be passed on to the end customer. This is what is going to happen. I think that's definitely a market phenomena. We need to pass on the benefits as we need to really look at the opportunity to grow up the volume in the period ahead. So as and when the new stocks start flowing in the effective new tax regime, you would definitely see prices come down.
Okay, fair enough. So I'm just trying to understand, and this is purely a business question, not so much from the end consumer's point of view, Mr. Biyani. For instance, a company like Future Retail, and if I get this right, I mean, you were operating at margins of 3.5% to 4% throughout the course of the last financial year. With the GST regime coming through, what does that do to the margin profile of a company like yours?
I think the way we have to look at it is the fact that the margin profile for us is going to be about the efficiencies that we build in our supply chain. I think what GST does bring in is simplicity in the way we try to run supply chain. And over a period of time, we will definitely look at all the costs that we incur and look at the advantages that we can build around some of these costs and build in a more efficient business model, which is what is ultimately going to expand the margin. The other thing that will definitely expand the margin is volumes grow. And I think, if prices keep coming down through both some part of it coming out of GST and some part of it coming out with higher volumes, we could definitely see margins expand. And
how much expansion are we talking about? Depending on, of course, I mean, as efficiently as you utilize all the levers?
You would realize the fact that, businesses are not run like breaking news. We can't come up to such conclusions so early.
Appreciate that. Mr. Biyani, if you could just stay on with us, let me quickly go back to the conversation that we're having with Ms. Shaw. Ms. Shaw, you mentioned, I mean, you would like to see certain other drugs get excluded from GST completely. Are there any specific representations that, you have been making or sort of the industry body has been making right now? Because parlays, I believe, are still underway. There are these 18 sectoral groups which are in conversation and in dialogue with, GST officials.
Well, I am aware of the fact that representations have been made for cancer drugs, because I think these are another class of drugs which are expensive and very critical drugs, and therefore I believe that these therapies such as these do need exemption from GST, especially when we really have a very expensive healthcare system in the country, and we do not have sufficient coverage for patients to bear the cost. So on one hand, you're trying to force drug pricing and other means of reducing healthcare costs, but I think the most obvious one is to exempt such drugs from GST and give the patients the benefit of these reductions.
And ma'am, with this big reduction coming in on insulin, should we assume that straight away it's going to have a drastic impact on insulin prices? What sort of a reduction can we expect? Because the government keeps talking about anti-profiteering, so I don't think that manufacturers will be able to keep any of this as a cushion. Would that be a right reading?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in any case, I think the manufacturers in general pass on these benefits to patients, because it is a very, very competitive space, and I think manufacturers and producers do tend to pass on these benefits to patients.
So what sort of a reduction in prices can we expect in the domestic market as far as insulin goes?
Well, I think on an overall basis to a patient, it should be at least 10% less expensive.
Okay. All right, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining in. We still have Mr. Biyani on the line. We also have Mr. Ganesh Gala joining in of Navneet Education. That's pretty important there because the tax rates on school bags, on notebooks, they've also come down. Mr. Gala, I'll just come to you in a second. But Mr. Biyani, just to come back to you, are there any further clarifications as a retailer, as a company, that you're still seeking ahead of July 1st?
I think, since the announcement last Saturday, specifically on the textiles and apparels, there was one very specific issue that we had raised, which was related to the job work charges, and those have been accepted as part of the representation, which was actually a huge impact otherwise on the industry. So I think it's really good to see that the GST Council is responding very quickly and really gearing up the entire industry for a July 1st rollout. I think, the next set of clarifications, etc., we have to wait for the announcement. We have to wait for whatever's been decided today to be read through. But the speed at which things are moving, as well as also the 18 groups that have been created, I'm sure as we keep moving forward, we will get all the clarity that we require. We are all very busy to get our entire supply chain ready for GST on the 1st of July.
So if you could give us a sense on exactly what level of readiness is that supply chain at right now when you're looking at vendors and you're looking at the way, the input tax credit is going to flow. I mean, what's the sense as of now?
I would say that, in our reviews, there's nothing red in color right now. There's a lot of amber that we see everywhere. Which means the fact that things are progressing. Nothing which says the fact that we are going to stumble on the 1st of July. So it's only a matter of time as we keep moving forward. I'm sure, things will continue in the month of July also. For such a big change, there can't be just one date and everything will become different. It's a process, and I'm sure, I was just listening to the show earlier, and I agree with Mr. Shah that this is going to take a few months, but we have to just keep moving forward.
And finally, Mr. Biyani, what is the position at your end with respect to inventory? What's the approach you're following with respect to existing stock as we run up to the changeover regime?
I think some of the issues which has been roaming, which has been there and media has been covering about the fact that there is what will happen to the opening stocks, the transition stocks, etc. Many of these are unfounded. I think the transition rules, as they've been announced over the last 2 meetings, they have made it that much simpler and easier. I think we need to really focus at what the customer really needs, and we are definitely working with our vendors to ensure the fact that there's least amount of impact in the supply chain. There should not be any reason why the supply chain should get impacted or people should stop trading because we're going to transition to the GST. Anybody doing that is sort of missing out the understanding of what GST is achieving and what the rules are allowing people to do.